After writing 2 transformational books myself and supporting many other beings to do the same, I've become enthralled by the deep and mysterious magic that's activated when we choose to say yes to ourselves and commit to the book writing journey. Of course, we want to inspire change and new perspectives in our readers, but the transformation that happens as an author, both throughout the writing process and by actually releasing your book into the world, is surprisingly potent. I know I've been blindsided in the most disruptive and delicious ways by some of the changes my books have brought into my life. Writing a book is like casting a spell. Although we can never be completely sure what's going to be unleashed during the process, we choose to do it anyway. This Unbound one is a heroic journey. Each book has the potential to be a magical portal, a doorway to a new world, both for you and your reader. Each book has a very specific medicine that it's here to share with us. And each book gives us the opportunity to alchemize the magnificent imperfection of our experience into gold. The truth is that anyone can write a book. We could all get a few thousand words down and put them together. But what fascinates me is what happens when we allow the book writing process to go deeper. When we say, fuck it, get naked and dive way down beneath the surface. Letting go of the shoulds and any need to be acceptable, sensible, or approved of. What fascinates me is what happens when we make ourselves fully available to being transformed by the very act of writing a book. This is Unbound Writing, and this is the process we'll be exploring together here in the Unbound Writers Club. I'm Nicola, author and founder of the Unbound Press, and I help magical beings to write the transformational book they're really here to write at this time. I'm your guide here in the Unbound Writers Club, and the aim of this podcast is to help you to feel supported, encouraged, activated as you embark on your book writing journey. Whether you're a first-time author or have many books out in the world, my hope is that you will find something here to inspire you. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Unbound Writers Club. Today I want to talk to you about something that comes up often when I am speaking with people who are feeling the call to write a book. And it's about your story, like how much of your story to share in your book. So this comes up in different ways. Sometimes the question is, I'm really feeling called to write my book and share my story. But if I do that, I am worried about what people might think, what the people closest to me, like how they'll feel as I'm sharing my story, because maybe there are elements of your story that you haven't shared with the people who are closest to you, your parents, your loved ones, you know, whoever that may be, people from your past, your children, your partner. Maybe they know bits of your story or even a lot of your story, but they don't really know how experiences have impacted on you. So the thought of really kind of sharing your soul on the page feels edgy. So that can come up. And also this idea of, oh, well, who would be interested in my story anyway? What if people are thinking, like, who does she think she is? All of this stuff can come up. So there are different kind of layers of fears and doubts that can come up when we are thinking about sharing our story. And it is easy, or can feel much easier, to hide on the page behind kind of information and knowledge that we want to be sharing. Like, you can write a book where you are taking your reader through a process, and it's more of a how-to book. And there is nothing wrong with that whatsoever. You know, we are We need information, we need guides on our paths. And whatever you're writing about, I'm sure there is going to be a strong element of that in your book. Like, even if you're writing a memoir, to be honest, there are going to be some how-tos. There's going to be some information in there through the very nature of you sharing your experience. Like, people get to learn from that. But if you are feeling, actually, I don't really want to include any of myself, it feels too risky to include any of my story or much of my story in my book, I might scatter a few pieces through it, things that feel kind of more comfortable. If that is coming up for you, I want you to know that, one, I completely get that. And two, actually, that's where the magic is. That's where your magic is. Your magic is in your story. And you might not believe that, but actually, it is your story that is going to bring your book to life. It's your story that is going to create a sense of connection with your reader. And you've probably heard me talk about this over and over again. My invitation to you today is to be willing to share more of your story through your writing in your book than feels comfortable. To actually allow your story to get to that kind of too much point, that point where you're like questioning, oh my goodness, this is feeling too much. Like, really, who would want to hear this? Because this is exactly what people want to hear. Now, I want to mention a question that came up in the Unbound book incubator the other day. Somebody was writing about the book that's coming through for her, and she's writing about her own experiences, and the question came up. It was something like, oh, I don't want it to be too sensational, because I think, particularly as women, those of us who've been socialized as girls, we pick up this message, or we might have picked up this message, we most likely have picked up the message that whenever we are sharing about ourselves, talking about ourselves, we're making a fuss, like we're showing off in some way. So when you're writing and you're talking about yourself, you're talking about your experience, all of that old stuff can come up. It'd be like, oh, am I just showing off here? Like, oh, I don't want this to be too sensational. I don't want it to attract too much attention. And my response to that person was, well, isn't that exactly what you want your writing to be? That you want your book to be sensational. And what I mean by that is sensational in the sense that, wow, your book is amazing and your story is amazing, but also that it creates sensation, it activates sensation in your reader. And really, yeah, information can do that. When you learn something, that all of a sudden it lands, it slots into place. It's like, yes, that can evoke sensation within us, but it's much more likely to be somebody's story that does that. And certainly with Unbound writing, the books that we're releasing through the Unbound Press, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a book, we're looking for writing that activates transformation in our readers. Certainly, it activates some kind of sensation. Like, as your reader is reading your words, they can feel it in their body. Like, they're remembering elements of their own experience. So rather than thinking, oh, I don't want this to be sensational, it's like, oh, actually, yes, I do. And I'm willing to say to that part of me that's like, oh, who do you think you are? You're just making a fuss. You're just showing off. Okay, I hear you. And that's actually coming from an old place. And I'm ready to make a fuss. Doesn't the world need more women, more magical beings making a fuss right now and freaking showing off? Like, I want you to show off on the page, because very often when it feels like you're showing off, that is the point when you are being most fully expressed. It's just old conditioning that is telling you that you're showing off. So yes to the sensational. Yes to including more of your story than most likely feels comfortable. And I'm going to give you some writing prompts to work with around this. But I want to speak to the piece We've been speaking to that piece of like, who does she think she is? All of that stuff that can come up when we're thinking about sharing our stories in our books. But I also want to speak to this fear about what other people might think, or that us sharing our story might hurt the people that we're closest to, because maybe they're hearing things for the first time, or we're sharing elements of their experience, through us talking about our own. So there's a couple of things I want to say here. One, I always encourage writers, if they're writing any kind of memoir or sharing any elements of their story in their book and they're worried about other people maybe disagreeing with what they've said, or be like, oh no, I experience things differently, any of this stuff coming up, that at the beginning of your book or somewhere at the beginning, you acknowledge that whatever you are sharing is from your own perspective. Like, this is the way you experienced these events. And you can say that there may be others who have experienced them differently, who remember them differently. And that's okay. I'm writing from my perspective, which is all that I can do. So just through acknowledging that there may be other people who have seen past events differently, who've experienced them differently, it kind of frees you up to be really owning your point of view, your perspective, but it also kind of acknowledges the experiences of others as well. So that can really help when it comes to sharing your story. Also, if there are people that you are close to, you're worried about how they're going to feel about your book and when your story or elements of your story are out in the world, if you can at all, I would encourage you to have a conversation with them about that as you are writing it, just to let them know that, you're in this process of writing your book. You're going to be sharing elements of your story, and you're conscious of how that might impact on them. You don't necessarily have to go into all the details, but if you can, if that feels okay for you, then I would always encourage you to have some kind of conversation. And I have worked with authors where they have felt able to do that, and it's actually activated healing in the relationship that they have with that other person. So just opening the door of that conversation has allowed healing to take place. Now, that might not always feel possible. It may be that you're not even in contact with the person that you're thinking of, or you don't have the kind of relationship where you feel able to have this kind of conversation with them. And I completely understand that. And actually, very often, we're worried about a particular person reading our book. Maybe it is a parent, maybe it's an ex-partner, maybe it's a friend from the past, maybe it's someone from school, maybe it's an ex-colleague. There's all of these people that can get in our heads and block us from sharing our story, block us from sharing our magic, our medicine with the world. And in my experience, often these people, they don't even, like, your book is not even on their radar. Or they might see that you have a book out, but they're not going to go to the trouble of reading the whole thing because they have their own lives, they have their own thing going on. So I just want to kind of put that possibility out there that the person you're most worried about reading your book and hearing your story in this way, or seeing your story in this way, it's not even going to come into their field, like their energetic field. They're not actually going to be interested in your book. And I'm sorry to break that to you. But it's possible. Lots of the people who are closest to me have not read any of my books, and that's perfect. Some of the people who are closest to me have read my books, and often we haven't even had a discussion about that. It's like they've had their experience of reading it. It's all good. As Unbound writers, and this is a part of living Unbound, it's a part of writing Unbound, we have to be willing to go first. We have to be willing to be the one who goes, okay, I know this is scary. I know this feels edgy. This feels uncomfortable. I don't know what might unfold from me sharing this, but it feels important for me to do that. And I can pretty much guarantee that whatever does unfold from you sharing your story, even if it is uncomfortable, even if it is sensational in that way, it evokes sensation in you, like the response of other people, that you can handle it, that you can hold space for whatever comes up. That is my belief about you, because you have up until this point. And I know it's different to be writing a book and putting your experiences out there in this particular way. But like, as I often say, like, the fact that you're feeling the call is no accident. And you know what elements of your story are feeling called to be shared in your book. Like, you already know. And again, that is no accident. So I'm going to give you some prompts now to help with this. These are prompts that we use in the different group processes that I hold space for, the Unbound Book Incubator, and also the Unbound Writing Mastermind. So these are just to give you a sense, a starting place when it comes to sharing your story. So one, I want you to think about, what are the key turning points that have brought you to where you are now? What are the key turning points in your life? When you think back, what are those moments that stand out? It's like, everything changed from that point. Because when we share those with our readers, it helps them either to acknowledge their own turning points or to actually activate some kind of turning point, some shift within them. Writing prompt number 2. When were the times in my life that I felt completely lost, and how did I find my way? When were the times in my life that I felt completely lost, and how did I find my way? And actually, as I'm reading that prompt, I'm prompted to actually say whatever is coming up around sharing your story. And this is something, a piece of advice, encouragement, an invitation that I often make. If something is coming up for you, bring it to the page. So if there's fear around sharing your story, acknowledge that in your writing. If you're worried about what people might think, or you feel people might judge you as being too much, like, acknowledge that on the page, because that's going to free you up. And it's also going to create a sense of connection with your reader. I'm just going to come back to that prompt again. When were the times in my life that I felt completely lost, and how did I find my way? It's through sharing those stories, or this kind of story, you get to be a wayfinder for your reader. And it also helps you to make sense of your own experience. Like, that's the power of sharing our stories. Every time we do it, it helps us to make a bit more sense of our experience. And this last prompt I'm going to share with you, like, this is the one that is probably going to activate some sensation in you. What is the story that I'm secretly scared to tell? What is the story that I'm secretly scared to tell? I know you know what that is. I know what it is for me. And there may be more than one, but I'm sure there's one that's bubbling up. And my invitation to you is that even if it doesn't feel relevant to the book you're feeling called to the write, or the book that you are writing, I invite you to write that story for yourself, if no one else, because just doing that will, like I said before, help you to make sense of it, help you to reap soak up the nutrients of that experience in a different way. The story that you're secretly scared to tell. So yeah, write it for yourself first. And actually, that's a piece of advice that I often give. Like, if it's really kind of jamming you up, this thought of other people reading your story, then write it for yourself first. Allow yourself to have that experience, because actually, often through doing that, again, it frees you up. You come to really know in your bones the value of your story. And through doing that, very often, you build the courage to be able to share it through your book. Oh, so much to play with there. So I would love to hear from you if, like, some of these things have been coming up for you around sharing your story, if something I have said today has helped to create some kind of shift, or if, listening to this has made you decide, yes, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to share my story in one way or another. Please do get in touch and let me know. You can connect with me on Instagram. I'm at Nicola Humber. Come find me there. I would love to hear from you. And yeah, your story is your magic. Your story is your medicine. And please, please don't hold back on that. All right, my love. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. I've loved being in your earbuds, and I look forward to being back here again with you very soon.